The Children of the She-Wolf, How Rome Forged an Empire from a Myth. A hook and intro. May it please the fates, imagine a world plunged into darkness, a time before empires, before the very concept of a single power dominating the known world. Now picture two abandoned infants, not in a cradle of silk, but in the rough dirt, their only comfort the warmth of a wild she-wolf. This is where our story begins. Not with a king, not with an army, but with a primal roar and a tale of miraculous survival. This is the birth of Rome. From these mythical, blood-soaked origins, a city would rise. A city that would defy impossible odds, endure catastrophic defeats, and ultimately conquer an entire sea, transforming it into its own private lake. The Mediterranean, once a patchwork of warring kingdoms and trading powers, would become Mare Nostrum, our sea under the unwavering gaze of Rome. How did this happen? How did a small collection of huts on 7 hills in central Italy, founded on a tale of fratricide and divine favor, grow to overshadow the glorious, yet fragmented, civilizations of ancient Greece? Today, we journey through nearly 8 centuries of ambition, conflict, and sheer audacity. We'll witness the fading glory of Athens and Sparta, caught in a spiral of self-destruction, creating a power vacuum that a new, formidable force was poised to fill. We'll see the strategic genius of a shepherd boy's descendants as they forged a republic of iron and law. And we'll plunge into the brutal existential struggles that would define Rome, from the desperate battles against its Italian neighbors to the epic, world-shaking showdowns with its greatest rival, Carthage. This isn't just a history lesson. This is a grand epic, a tale of human will and geopolitical fate, a drama where every decision, every battle, every sacrifice pushed a fledgling city closer to absolute dominion. Think of the stakes, entire civilizations rising and falling, the course of law and language being set for millennia. This is the story of how Rome, born of a myth, became a master of its own destiny and, for centuries, the destiny of the world. By the end of this journey, you'll understand not just what happened, but why it mattered and why the echoes of Rome still resonate in our world today. Historical context and setup. To truly understand Rome's meteoric rise, we must first set the stage, not just in Italy, but across the entire Mediterranean basin. The year is approximately 753 before Christ. On the banks of the Tiber River, according to legend, a new city is born. Its founders, Romulus and Remus, are twin brothers. Their story is a brutal one, stained with the blood of kin. Born of Mars, the god of war, and a Vestal virgin, they are abandoned to the wilderness, only to be nursed by a she-wolf, a symbol of savage power and fierce protection. This isn't just a bedtime story, it's the very soul of Rome. Romulus, consumed by ambition, slays his brother Remus in a dispute over the city's boundaries. From this fratricide, Rome rises. A city marked from its very inception by violence, ambition, and a belief in its own divine destiny. It's a foundational myth that speaks volumes about the Roman character, determined, ruthless, and convinced of its right to rule. Early Rome was a rough-and-tumble monarchy, heavily influenced by its sophisticated Etruscan neighbors to the north, who taught them about urban planning, engineering, and even monarchical governance. But Rome quickly rejected the idea of absolute rule. Around 509 before Christ, the monarchy was overthrown, replaced by the Roman Republic. This wasn't a sudden democratic utopia, but a complex system of elected magistrates, primarily 2 consuls, and a powerful senate dominated by the aristocracy, the patricians. This period was defined by an intense internal struggle between the patricians and the common citizens, the plebeians. The plebeians, despite forming the backbone of Rome's military and economy, were initially excluded from most political power. This struggle of the orders was a crucible. It forced Rome to innovate. It led to the creation of the 12 Tables, Rome's first codified laws ensuring some legal protection for all citizens. It created tribunes, officials with the power to veto laws, specifically to protect plebeian rights. This internal dynamic, this constant push and pull, forged a remarkably resilient and adaptable political system. It was a system that could absorb shocks, learn from mistakes, and incorporate diverse viewpoints, a vital skill for future expansion. Meanwhile, across the Adriatic Sea, the older, more established Greek civilization was in a very different state. For centuries, the Greek city-states Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes had been the intellectual and cultural titans of the Mediterranean. They had pioneered democracy, developed groundbreaking philosophy, crafted unparalleled art and architecture, and repelled the mighty Persian Empire. But their greatest weakness was their inability to unite. The devastating Peloponnesian War, fought between Athens and Sparta from 431 to 404 before Christ, shattered the fragile balance of power. It was a brutal, prolonged conflict that bled the Greek polis, their city-states, dry, leaving them exhausted and fragmented. Think of a proud lion, still majestic, but wounded and vulnerable after a long internal fight. This disunity was a fatal flaw. It allowed the rising power of Macedon under King Philip II to conquer and unify much of mainland Greece by 338 before Christ. Philip's son, Alexander the Great, then carved out an empire stretching from Greece to India, spreading Hellenistic culture far and wide. But Alexander's empire, for all its glory, was a personal achievement, not an institutional one. Upon his death in 323 before Christ, it fractured into several warring Hellenistic kingdoms: Ptolemaic Egypt, the Seleucid Empire in the Near East, and Antigonid Macedon. These kingdoms, while powerful and culturally rich, were constantly embroiled in conflict with each other, preventing any lasting unity. So by the time Rome was consolidating its power in Italy, the Greek world was a land of cultural brilliance but political weakness. A rich tapestry, but one with many loose threads, vulnerable to a stronger, more unified force. The stage was set for a collision, a monumental clash between a rising, pragmatic power and the fragmented, glorious remnants of an older civilization. The story unfolds. Rome's journey from a small city to the master of the Mediterranean was not a linear march of victory. It was a brutal, often desperate struggle marked by staggering losses and remarkable resilience. First, Rome had to conquer its own backyard, the Italian peninsula. Through a series of wars against the Latins, the Samnites, the Etruscans, and even Greek colonies in the south, Rome gradually established its dominance. This wasn't just brute force, it was strategic. Rome offered conquered peoples varying degrees of citizenship, military alliances, and a share in its growing empire. This policy of integration, of making former enemies into allies, was a stroke of genius, turning conquered populations into loyal contributors to the Roman war machine. But true dominion meant controlling the sea, and in the western Mediterranean, one power stood supreme: Carthage. A formidable Phoenician city-state located in modern-day Tunisia, Carthage was a mercantile giant with a powerful navy and vast territories in North Africa, Sicily, Sardinia, and Spain. The clash between Rome and Carthage was not just a war, it was an existential struggle for control of the entire Western world. It exploded in 264 before Christ, igniting the First Punic War. Rome, a land-based power, had no navy to speak of. Carthage ruled the waves, but Rome was nothing if not adaptable. Legend says they reverse-engineered a stranded Carthaginian warship, then built a fleet of hundreds, often sacrificing quality for sheer numbers and speed. They invented the corvus, a boarding bridge that allowed their legionaries to turn naval battles into land engagements. After 23 brutal years, Rome emerged victorious, gaining Sicily, its first overseas province, Sardinia, and Corsica. The price was immense, but Rome had learned to master the sea. But this was only the prelude. 23 years later, in 218 before Christ, the Second Punic War erupted, sparked by the greatest military genius of the ancient world, Hannibal Barca. Hannibal, consumed by a generational hatred for Rome, launched an audacious, almost suicidal invasion. He led an army, complete with war elephants, across the treacherous Alps, a feat of logistics and sheer willpower that stunned the Roman world. For 16 agonizing years, Hannibal ravaged Italy. He inflicted crushing defeats on Roman armies at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and most famously at Cannae in 216 before Christ. At Cannae, Hannibal annihilated a Roman army reportedly twice his size, killing over 50,000 legionaries in a single day. Imagine the terror, the despair gripping Rome. Every man capable of bearing arms was called up. The city itself seemed on the verge of collapse. It was a wound that would scar Rome's psyche for centuries. But Rome, the city born of a she-wolf, refused to break. They adopted the Fabian strategy, named after their general Quintus Fabius Maximus, avoiding direct confrontation with Hannibal's superior forces, slowly bleeding him dry through skirmishes and attrition. They mobilized every man, every resource. They rebuilt their armies again and again. And then a new hero emerged, Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus. Scipio, a young general of incredible talent, understood that to defeat Hannibal, he couldn't fight him in Italy. He had to take the war to Carthage itself. Scipio invaded North Africa, forcing Carthage to recall Hannibal from Italy. The two greatest generals of their age met at the Battle of Zama in 202 before Christ. Scipio, having studied Hannibal's tactics, outmaneuvered him, securing a decisive victory. Hannibal, for the first time in his career, was utterly defeated. Carthage was broken. Rome, though battered and exhausted, was now the undisputed master of the Western Mediterranean. The Second Punic War was not just a victory, it was the crucible that forged the Roman character of unrelenting determination. But Rome's ambition knew no bounds. Less than 50 years later, driven by lingering fear and outright expansionism, they launched the Third Punic War. This was not a war of survival, but of annihilation. In 146 before Christ, after a brutal siege, Carthage was utterly destroyed, its lands annexed. The phrase Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed, was finally fulfilled. With Carthage gone, Rome turned its gaze eastward towards the fragmented Hellenistic kingdoms. These inheritors of Alexander the Great's empire were rich, but constantly at war with each other, weakened by internal rivalries and long-standing conflicts. Rome, now a military superpower, systematically intervened. Through a series of Macedonian wars, they defeated the Antigonid kingdom. In 146 before Christ, the same year Carthage fell, Rome brutally crushed the Achaean League, absorbing Greece itself into its burgeoning empire. The sack of Corinth was a harsh lesson for the Greek city-states. Rome continued its methodical expansion, conquering the Seleucid Empire in Asia Minor and the Levant, and finally Ptolemaic Egypt would fall under its sway centuries later. The Mediterranean Sea, once a contested space, was now Rome's domain Mare Nostrum. This wasn't just about territorial acquisition, it was about cultural absorption. Roman elites, while conquering Greece, deeply admired and adopted Greek philosophy, art, literature, and architectural styles. Roman culture became a sophisticated blend, a Greco-Roman synthesis spreading throughout its vast new empire. However, this relentless expansion came at a cost. The Republic, designed for a city-state, buckled under the weight of an empire. Massive influxes of wealth and, more importantly, millions of slaves fundamentally altered Roman society. Large estates, latifundia, worked by slaves, displaced small farmers, creating a vast, impoverished urban proletariat in Rome. This economic inequality, coupled with the political ambitions of powerful generals, plunged the Republic into a century of unprecedented civil wars. Figures like the Gracchi brothers attempted land reforms to help the poor, but they were brutally assassinated, highlighting the deep political divisions. The army, once composed of citizen soldiers, became professionalized, loyal to their generals, Marius, Sulla, Pompey, and Caesar, rather than to the state. These men, commanding immense personal power, began to tear the Republic apart, fighting bloody civil wars for ultimate control. The most famous of these figures was Gaius Julius Caesar. A brilliant general and charismatic politician, Caesar conquered Gaul, modern France, in a series of legendary campaigns. His legions were fiercely loyal to him. In 49 before Christ, defying the Senate's orders, Caesar famously crossed the Rubicon River, uttering the immortal words, "Alia iacta est, the die is cast." This act launched a devastating civil war against Pompey the Great and the senatorial faction. Caesar emerged victorious, becoming dictator for life, effectively ending the Republic. But his ambition was seen as a threat to the very ideals of Rome. On the Ides of March 44 before Christ, a group of senators, including Brutus, assassinated him in the Senate House, hoping to restore the Republic. Instead, it plunged Rome into yet another, even bloodier, civil war. Out of this chaos, a new figure rose, Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. He, along with Mark Antony and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, formed the Second Triumvirate, but their alliance soon crumbled, leading to a final showdown. In 31 before Christ, at the Battle of Actium, Octavian decisively defeated the combined forces of Mark Antony and Cleopatra of Egypt. With all rivals eliminated, Octavian stood supreme. He was a master politician, learning from Caesar's mistakes. He claimed to restore the Republic, but in reality, he centralized all power in his own hands. In 27 before Christ, he was granted the title Augustus, the revered one, becoming the first Roman emperor. This marked the definitive end of the Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. Under Augustus, Rome entered an unprecedented era of peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, which would last for 2 centuries. The Mediterranean was truly Roman. Its shores, once a battleground, were now connected by a vast network of Roman roads, trade routes, and a single unifying power. The dream of Romulus, born of myth and blood, had been realized. Impact and legacy. When the Pax Romana finally settled over the Mediterranean, nothing was ever the same. The immediate impact was profound and transformative. For the first time in history, a single political entity governed almost the entire coastline of the Mediterranean Sea. This was not just a territorial achievement, it was an economic revolution. Trade flourished on an unprecedented scale. Goods, ideas, and people moved freely across a vast, secure network of roads and sea lanes. Spices from the east, grains from Egypt, wine from Gaul, all flowed into Rome, the beating heart of this enormous empire. Empires that had stood for centuries, like the Hellenistic kingdoms, were gone, replaced by Roman provinces. New borders were drawn, new administrative systems imposed. The Roman legal system, with its emphasis on fairness for citizens and codified laws, began to spread, laying the groundwork for many legal traditions we see today. The very concept of universal law, applicable to diverse peoples, was a Roman innovation. The long-term consequences of Rome's conquest of the Mediterranean are immeasurable. For nearly 800 years, from its mythical founding to the height of its imperial power, Rome reshaped the world. Its language, Latin, became the lingua franca of the Western Empire, evolving into the Romance languages, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, and profoundly influencing countless others, including English. Its architectural and engineering feats, from the aqueducts that still stand today to the roads that connected continents, became benchmarks of human ingenuity. But perhaps the most enduring legacy was the Greco-Roman synthesis. While Rome conquered Greece militarily, Greek culture, philosophy, art, and literature conquered Rome culturally. Roman elites adopted Greek as a language of learning, sent their sons to Athens for education, and filled their villas with copies of Greek statues. This fusion created a unique, powerful classical civilization. Rome then acted as a crucial conduit, preserving and transmitting this rich Hellenistic heritage to subsequent European civilizations, ensuring its survival long after the ancient world faded. Consider a counterfactual. What if Carthage had won the Punic Wars? What if Hannibal had sacked Rome and wiped it from the map? The world we inhabit might be unrecognizably different. We might speak a Punic language, follow different laws, and worship different gods. The Renaissance, the Enlightenment, even the very framework of Western thought could have been dramatically altered, never benefiting from the unique legal, administrative, and cultural crucible that was Rome. The fall of Constantinople, nearly 1,000 years after Rome's rise, would eventually mark the end of another great Roman legacy, the Eastern Roman Empire, but that is a story for another time. Even the eventual decline and fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 Anno Domini, centuries after our story's climax, was a testament to the colossal scale of Rome's impact. Its fall wasn't a sudden collapse, but a long process of transformation, where Roman institutions, laws, and culture continued to influence the new Germanic kingdoms that emerged in its wake. The Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantium, would carry the torch for another 1,000 years, a living testament to Rome's enduring power. Reflections and lessons. The saga of Rome, from its mythical origins to its dominion over the Mediterranean, offers more than just a chronological narrative. It provides profound insights into universal patterns of history and the complexities of human nature. We see how empires rise through relentless ambition, military innovation, and a pragmatic ability to absorb and integrate diverse peoples. Rome did not just conquer, it governed, built, and assimilated, creating a stability that lasted for centuries. But we also see the seeds of decline inherent in spectacular success. The very expansion that brought immense wealth and power to Rome also created internal tensions, vast inequalities, social unrest, and the rise of powerful individuals who ultimately undermined the Republic. History, it seems, often rhymes. Overconfidence can lead to overextension. Internal divisions, if left unchecked, can be more destructive than any external enemy. This story teaches us about resilience. Rome endured the near destruction of the Second Punic War, the savagery of Hannibal, and the century of civil wars, yet always found a way to rebound, to adapt, to survive. It teaches us about leadership, the strategic brilliance of a Scipio Africanus, the political genius of an Augustus, the devastating ambition of a Julius Caesar. And it forces us to confront the moral ambiguities of power, the immense benefits of peace and order, often forged through brutal conquest and exploitation. As you reflect on Rome's journey, consider these questions. How much of Rome's success was due to its own inherent strengths? Its military, its law, its administration, and how much to the weaknesses and divisions of its rivals, like the Greek city-states and Hellenistic kingdoms? History is often a play of both internal might and external opportunity. When should a society prioritize stability over freedom? Augustus brought an end to civil wars and ushered in the Pax Romana, but at the cost of the Republic. Was it a worthy trade-off? Many Romans at the time certainly thought so. Can violence ever truly create lasting peace, or does it only sow the seeds for the next conflict? The Romulus and Remus myth and the destruction of Carthage remind us of the bloody foundations upon which great empires are often built. What defines an empire's legacy? Is it its conquests, its laws, its culture, or its ultimate fate? Rome's impact resonates not just in its ruins, but in the very fabric of our modern world. How do we balance cultural preservation with cultural assimilation? Rome absorbed Greek culture, but in turn, Romanized vast populations. What is lost and what is gained in such processes? Outro. From two abandoned infants nursed by a she-wolf to the undisputed master of the Mediterranean, Rome's journey is one of history's most compelling sagas. It is a story of myth made real, of a city that transformed itself and in doing so transformed the world. It's a testament to human ambition, resilience, and the enduring power of institutions. In roughly 800 years, Rome grew from a tiny settlement into an empire that shaped law, language, and culture for millennia. The Mediterranean, once a diverse collection of independent cultures, became a unified Roman lake, symbolizing a level of dominance never before seen. The fall of the Western Roman Empire came centuries later, but the story of its rise, its struggles, and its triumphs continues to offer invaluable lessons. If you're fascinated by the empires that defined our world, you might want to explore how the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantium, carried on the Roman legacy for another 1,000 years, defending Europe against new threats. Or perhaps you're curious about the specific innovations in Roman law and engineering that allowed them to manage such a vast territory. We'll delve into those stories in future videos. History is not just about the past, it's a mirror reflecting who we are, a guide to where we might be headed. The empires of yesterday rose and fell, teaching us about the delicate balance of power, the fragility of peace, and the enduring strength of human spirit. The questions Rome wrestled with, questions of governance, justice, expansion, and identity, are still questions we grapple with today. And as long as humanity strives, struggles, and dreams, the children of the she-wolf will continue to whisper their epic tale across the ages. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through time.